For those of you that are new, these books, all kinds of literature you can read on Trinity. John Bear, I think, is fairly accessible. It's pretty dense, but it's accessible. John Bear, here are 3 books here. You can probably lend them out if you want, if you don't mind bringing them back. Bear's work, Formation of Christian Theology, and it's really good. Really, really good. So here's the books. You want those? You can pass that around when you want. Okay. So let's bring up the handout, An Introduction to the Christian God. We got through early on. So it was good conversation. So we are in the study of the Trinity, the Christian God. Come on in. We got seats here and seats over here. Feel free to have a seat wherever you want, Margie. Very quick review. We start out by knocking off a problem, which is when Christians say God, we mean a being, and we mean one being. We call that one being monotheism, monotheistic religion. There's one being. In the ancient world, they didn't use that word. Monotheism is a modern term. So that's what makes it problematic. When you read the Bible, it's difficult to demonstrate that all Jews thought only God exists. That's difficult to demonstrate. In fact, the opposite is true. If you look down to Roman numeral 3, letter A. And this is what we started doing last week. Biblical authors refer to other gods who should not be worshipped. There are multiple references to other gods. And I gave you background on El, Elohim. By the way, if you want to listen to last week's Trinity study, this is on, of course, Facebook Live. It's on my podcast, the audio version. So after the class, if you don't know how to reach those things, I'll try to get them to you somehow. I can get you in a flash drive. If you have a laptop, computer, I'll try my best to give you if you missed a class. If you have Facebook, go there too. Look at there. Come on in. They've got plenty. There's a seat there. You might just flip it around and you can sit wherever you want. If you don't mind, make sure she has a handout. This one right there. Pat, if you mind. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sue. So, talking about monotheism, God is one being. There's a lot of different gods referenced in the Bible. Remember, just real quickly, look at Roman number 2. So monotheism is problematic, but it's a good term. It means God is sovereign over everything. 2, when Christians use the word God throughout the history of Christianity, typically God refers to all 3 persons, the Father, Son, and Spirit. In the Bible, when you see God, it almost always refers to God the Father. That's problematic, I know, because I just said 2 different things. I'll say that one more time. In modern Christian thought, and for a long time in the church, when we use the word God, we mean the Trinitarian God. All 3 of them. The whole show, like the Pendergrass family. That's not a close analogy, but okay. To say Pendergrass, let's say we're the only 3 in existence. Father, Son, and Spirit. When you read the Bible, that's not the case. God almost always refers to what we would call God the Father. God the Father has a name, Yahweh. And I put it in your handout there, caps lock Lord. In your English translations, when it's all capital letters, that translates Yahweh. Often when you hear me read from the Bible, I say Yahweh when it says Lord. I don't have a special translation. I just know what it means behind it. Lowercase L, capital L, lowercase O-R-D, is Adon or Adonai, my Lord or Lord. So those 3 are the most common ways to talk about the Father. And sometimes, I told you last time, I should have put on there El, Elohim. I should have put that there. The Son is God the Son. God the Son. And I said this last time. I'm saying this on purpose again because it's worth repeating. When Christians should never say God became flesh. God didn't become flesh. That means all the Trinity did. That's not true. God the Son became flesh. In John 1, the Word became flesh. It doesn't say God became flesh. It says the Word. And the Word, historically and traditionally, we mean the Son. When the Son, God the Son, incarnated, incarnatio means to take on flesh, literally. We gave that incarnation a name. The name is? Jesus. That's right. Yeshua. That wasn't you. I was making fun of myself on the South. We said Jesus. Yeshua, Joshua, Jesus. That's his name. So before Jesus was incarnated, he didn't have a name. Just God the Son is what we call him. It was no name. Some people like to go back in the Old Testament and say he was always there. Maybe, maybe not. We'll talk about that later. And then there's the Spirit. So God is Father, Son, and Spirit. And that relationship of Father, Son, and Spirit is the purpose. We're going to explain that, talk about it, reflect on it. This whole study, that's the whole point. Okay? So when I'm going to use those words usually pretty clearly. Okay? And then what we did is we're looking at the biblical examples, the other gods, and so forth. Letter B, biblical authors also, not only admit other gods, but a bunch of other biblical authors say only God exists or is to be worshipped. Well, David, what do you do with that? Well, it's there. I didn't write it. So on the one hand, you have a lot of verses that say other gods should not be worshipped, which assumes they exist. Some kind of being exists. The being shouldn't be worshipped because the being is not the creator God. They're might call minor gods. And then other biblical authors, certainly the prophets and all the New Testament, said the only God who really exists or is to be worshipped is Yahweh. Let me say one quick thing about that, and then we're going to pick up any questions and we'll hit the ground running. I like to throw in some nerd talk here and there, and always feel free, if you're new to this, always ask questions, comments, we jump in there. It's certainly okay. The idea, because of these facts, because the Bible mentions other gods not to be worshipped, the assumption is a lot of Jews for a long time did worship other gods. Otherwise, why do they keep saying, don't do it? Think about that for a second, right? The assumption is they were doing it. So the prophets and Moses and on, they come around saying, stop doing it, knock it off. Well, if they weren't doing it, why are they saying that? So when someone says, did ancient Jews do X? The answer is, well, they probably did all kinds of stuff. The question is, should they have? Should they have? Did ancient Jews worship all the gods? Probably so, to some degree. Should they have? All the prophets would say, no, knock it off. There's one God. All right, and that's the number one temptation of the ancient Israelites, is to worship Yahweh and Baal, and Asherah, and El of the Canaanite version, the other gods. Join them together. It's all cool. It's polytheism. Join it all together, because everybody back then is polytheist, many gods. And the Jews had neighbors who were polytheists. I mean, down the street, the kids went to school, sometimes, with Canaanites and so forth. I mean, they were bumping shoulders, marketplace ideas. Everybody believed in different gods. And then here comes the Jews going, no, only one is to be worshipped. So many scholars say that Jews early on, long time ago, weren't monotheists. In fact, they would say, is that they were henotheist. Henotheist. Henotheism is the belief that there's a chief god and a bunch of other minor gods, which is different from monotheism, where you might say only one God exists. So there's a big daddy, a grandpa, and a lot of ancient people were that way. Now the odds are pretty high the ancient Jews were henotheists too. And over time, the more God revealed himself, the more the prophets like Moses and Isaiah and all these people, Elijah, all of them kept saying, knock it off. These other gods have no power. They shouldn't be worshipped. And it was wasn't that much of an easy step to say, well, if they're not to worship, that means they're not really gods, which means there's only one God. You got to develop. That's probably how it developed to some degree. It's probably not that clean, but okay, I'm going to stop there because that catches it up to where last week I like to do about a 5-6 minute review. What questions or comments do you have? If you weren't here last week and you want to do a whole hour study, you need to go online and listen to it. But what can I do? Anything else?
David?
Yes.
Well,
Yes, ma'am.
the fact that you say that they should not worship other gods, that assumes that there are other gods.
That's right. The fact that, just to repeat, I repeat this for the podcast so you can hear the question. That's right. The fact that they say don't worship other gods means they believed, at least certain groups of Jews believed, there were other gods. Other powerful beings in the heavenly realms.
Was that corrected?
Was it corrected?
Was that thought corrected?
It was a thought corrected. As a Christian, the answer I would say is, yeah, it was corrected. That is, I assume they were wrong, because as a Christian, I believe, and that number one Roman numeral, that monotheism, biblical monotheism is that there's one sovereign over other beings. I think that's true. I also think it's true that God is the only God that exists. So as a Christian, I would say it's true. ancient Canaanites and every other Egyptian, everybody would say, they wouldn't correct it at all. You are wrong to say there's only one God. Yeah. So from my perspective, they were wrong. That includes the Jews who worship the other God. So I side with the prophets. Yeah, I side with Jesus who says, no, they don't exist. Yeah.
How about the fact that there is a spiritual realm, and there's other powerful spiritual forces, not in the place of God, not with the authority of God, but having some sort of power. I mean, even Satan has much spiritual power in comparison to God, nothing.
Right.
But there's from that perspective, I could see people saying that there's other gods, as in there's other spiritual forces that have power, and can do surprising things.
That's exactly right. So that goes to letter D. Old Testament authors and New Testament authors, by the way, refer to many, I'll call them heavenly creatures. They call them the sons of God. They call them angels. They call them the assembly of the holy ones. And of course, the New Testament talks about spirits, demons, Satan, the devil, Beliar, Beelzebul, things like that. And so what the Jews eventually get to, and certainly Christians are there now and Jews are there now, this is what we believe now, but 3,000 years ago it may not have been so clean cut. But it got to this belief in the Bible that God is up here and there's a hard line. Only God is worshipped. Why? Because only God creates, only God judges, only God gives commandments that all humans are supposed to obey. Only God has authority to do what He wants. Only God is fully sovereign. On and on and on. There's certain characteristics that only God does. Then beneath God, or we might call the heavenly realm, beneath an authority, but they are these creatures, these angels, assembly of the holy ones, sons of God. That's letter D. And that's what I put in red up here. That's right. Those red marks up here are what we now think they probably thought of the other gods. They're powerful beings. They're not to be worshipped because they didn't make it to the top of the line. Paul, the Apostle Paul, in the New Testament, centuries later, after the Old Testament, would say the same thing. He said, the prince of the power of this air and the rulers of this age. He believes in powerful beings of darkness that rule over. They rule over this earthly existence. They're not worshipped, but they're powerful beings in the heavenly realms. Beneath all them are humans, and of course beneath humans are creatures, animals, other animals. Yes, ma'am.
But aren't these other powerful beings, whatever they may be, given that power by God, and He can take it away anytime He likes? That's what I think.
Aren't these beings that are beneath God?
I mean, like the devil tempted Job. God said He can do anything to him but kill him.
Right. Yeah, those are good, big questions. To say as succinctly as I can, yes, the beings which exist, all beings which exist, all of them are creatures, and that they are contingent beings. A creator created to some degree or another. The process or mechanism He used, that's for debate. But the answer is, we are all contingent. All of those contingent beings, that's us, animals, supernatural beings, none of those beings are outside of God's sovereignty. I absolutely agree with that. The second thing you said is about even the devil tempted Job. Kind of. He's never called the devil in the Old Testament. That's a New Testament concept that comes later. In the Old Testament, Ha-Satan is not a name. The accusing. We call him Satan. That's not his name. It's his job title. The accusing one. And he's not evil in the Old Testament. He's given a job by God to point out the bad things you've done. And so Job, he goes, I found someone. I guarantee you take all this stuff. He's not going to worship you. But maybe sometime we'll talk about that if you like. I talked about some of that in the Revelation study. I do remember that. Good. Any questions or comments about this so far? Going strong. So they do refer to these creatures, these other powerful creatures. Go back to letter C. God really, in the Old Testament, there is no, Oh, gosh, I'm glad I caught myself there. Okay, so people ask the question, and this is debated, and Christians debate this issue. They do. Well-intended, smart, Jesus-loving Christians do not agree on this issue. But I will tell you my view, and it's the question of, does the Trinity exist in the Old Testament? Okay, here's my response to that, and this relates to letter C. It relates to letter C. Does God, so this is how I answer the question. If by the question do you mean, does God exist in three co-equal, co-eternal beings, persons? Yes. If you mean, did the Old Testament authors believe in Trinity? The answer is no, they did not. The Trinitarian belief that develops over centuries takes centuries. And we're going to get there in only 4 easy pages. 5 pages. We're going to get there. I'm going to skip a long period of time of the church, and then we'll get to the end of it. Isn't that right, Chelsea? You've been through this before. So, and she's a pro at it. So we're going to get to the Trinitarian development as it develops. But did God the Father, Son, and Spirit exist in the Old Testament era? Yes, absolutely. God, Father, Son, and Spirit has existed, and we might say, forever. Our biblical author would say, from the foundation of the earth. That means before there's time. However, in the Old Testament, while there was no developed Trinity, they do understand God as relating to the world and humanity, and they use 3 different major ways to talk about the way he interacts. So we call this like proto-orthodoxy, early forms of it. If you say, where did it all start? Most Christians say it started in the Old Testament. And for example, God is called the Father. But rarely, in fact, Deuteronomy 32:6, he's implied to be the Father in other places, but called explicitly the Father, actually is very rare. God relates to humanity by his wisdom or his word. And so the Jews spoke about God's spoken word as if it became personified. And that fits the ancient context very well. If you remember your stories in the Old Testament, remember what happened with Jacob and Esau? What happened? Bible readers? Who's his daddy? Who's your daddy? Isaac is the daddy. Isaac wants to bless his sons, but one tricks the other one by wearing a hairy old beast. He thinks it's the hunter's son. And he goes, you shall inherit my inheritance, basically. And the guy goes, go! He borrows the jacket from his brother for a bowl of soup. He tricks the dad, and then come to find out it was a wrong brother. It happens all through the Bible that the younger brother gets the one up on the older brother. And we go, well, so what? In the ancient world, the older brother had the authority. So a common trope or story motif is the younger brother usurps the older brother. And this is one of those stories. People always go, why in the world, when Isaac said, I bless you, here's my inheritance, and you go back and say, never mind, wait a second, you lied to me. You tricked me. I take it back. I give it to the other son. Remember, he was blind. He could, anyway. Why did he do that? Because in the ancient world, they believed that once you spoke it, it had authority on its own, a weight on its own that could not be retracted. We say sticks and stones break my bones, and words will never hurt me. That's not what they believe in the ancient world. In the Middle East, mostly, from people who've told me, who are specialists, is still a very similar way. Once that blessing is spoken, it is out. It is unleashed. And that's a very good Middle Eastern Mediterranean mindset. And that's exactly what they did with God, God the Father. When God the Father thought and spoke, it boom. And so they started speaking of God's creative act as his word, his wisdom, and it became personified. And then, of course, they speak of God's Spirit often. But in the Old Testament, God's Spirit is sent for special occasions to enable a person for a task. If I say, son, go in there and buy me milk. I ain't got no money. Here's $5. Go talk to that front. Go buy the milk. It's white. Get 1%. Go talk. I train them. I give them the necessary tools. That's how the Spirit is in the Old Testament. God the Father says, I want you to be king. I want you to be a prophet. I want you to be in a great nation. Whatever it is, I'm going to send my Spirit upon it. But I can take that junk back. Whenever I'm getting my money back. So God's Spirit, God's presence takes on, can be taken back. So in the Old Testament, you have these, and I can give many more examples. I'll just give you a few here. Father and his Word and Spirit. Now let me drop a little footnote or a flash forward. In the New Testament era, by the time of Jesus, they rely upon this as the backdrop, that's their Bible, to start trying to figure out how to talk about Jesus. They go back to their Bible. That's what they know. And they go, well, what do I do with Jesus all of a sudden? Because we believe he's been resurrected. Not just resurrected, and I'll get to this later on. I hope I do. If not, if it's in the notes, I'm going to bring it up. Because he's not just resurrected. He's ascended and ruling. Well, whoever rules gets worshipped. So he's not a dude anymore. If we were thought he was a dude, we're wrong now. He's a dude plus. Not just Superman, but he's got to be more than that. And so what do? I don't have categories for that. And they go, yeah, we do. Our Bible, our Old Testament. And so they go back there to mine these verses and go, oh, look at there. These three major ways of talking about what God's been doing with humanity. He's been there all along. But ancient Jews did not think that way. If you time travel and ask Moses, do you believe in the Trinity? We go, what? Trinitas is a Latin word. Latin hasn't been invented yet. Do you believe that God is in three persons? He'd go, what? No. He just wouldn't think that way. So that's why that's a trick question. Did the Trinity exist in the Old Testament? Yes. Did the ancient authors understand it, Trinitarian theology? Almost certainly no. Sometimes you go to Genesis 1, which I'll preach on this Sunday. Why did God create humans? He says, let us make humans in our image. Man and woman. Remember that? Let us. A lot of Christians like to say, see, it was there from the very beginning. Maybe. I don't find it convincing at all. Most scholars don't either. And I will tell you in the sermon why. You have to come back. I know you're dying to find out. Okay, any questions or comments about that? I want to move on. Anything else? Anything? If you want to know the most controversial Old Testament passage for a couple hundred years in the early church, it's Proverbs 8. Proverbs 8. Because they went there and said Jesus is that word or wisdom. Why? Because John says the word became flesh. And word for logos and wisdom, Sophia, means similar concepts in the first, second century. And so they go, see, he's there all along. The problem is in Proverbs 8, wisdom is created. So a lot of Christian bishops said, therefore Jesus was created. And everyone else said, you have gone crazy. What are you smoking? You can't say that. What is created can't save us. That's a creature. Creatures are not worshipped. So Proverbs 8 became a massive, massive landmine. It's biblical, but does it refer to Jesus or not? And you won't hear that much preached these days because I don't preach it because I don't think anyway. All right. I just like throw out little grenades and leave. Okay, Roman number 4. In the ancient Near East, I'll use A&E. You know what that means? Ancient Near East. Near East is like saying the Middle East, but A&E, ancient, means basically, let's say around 2000 BC, which is around the time of Abraham, to, let's go all the way up to about the return of Babylon exile to about 515 BC. So, way back then, way before Jesus, is the ancient Near East. So think Moses, Abraham before him, think King David, that's all ancient Near East, basically. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you some distinctions, and John Walton is very helpful in this point, bringing the distinction. This is absolutely good stuff, and it's hard for us who have been raised in the church, which is okay, to emotionally appreciate how distinct the Jews thought of their God. And I'll be honest, of course, I'm not a perfect preacher, and I try my best to bring this stuff out when I preach. And I want so badly to spend more time there, but then some people go, well, you're so academic, and others go, well, I want to hear more about it. It's hard because without knowing the background, it's like explaining a joke. Well, it's not funny when you explain it to my wife all the time. What are you laughing at? What's funny about it? Well, that guy, never mind, forget it. By the time it's like dissecting a frog, it doesn't croak. Well, it does it because you killed it. It's a gross corpse frog on the table. Anyway, that's like how it is with things in the parables in the ancient world. So we go, God says, I am one. And we go, I hear it all the time. But man, if you know the background knowledge of how radical that is, it is a big deal. Having said that, the ancient Jews shared a lot in common with their neighbors. I love how Walton says it, and many scholars, in the cognitive environment. What that means is, how do you think about the world? For example, most scholars think that when they thought about how the world began, we call it a cosmogony, how the world began, how did this world start? Nobody, no Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Canaanite, Babylonian, Jew, nobody would have said, well, it started with different laws of physics, and this law of the quantum mechanics, no one would have thought that way. They didn't think of stuff, material stuff like that. They would have answered the question of going, oh, the gods or God had a battle or something and fought it out to show the God's power and sovereignty, and it gave function. He named things or separated things or gave it function. That's why we're here. And I've said it over and over in the sermon. That's how they thought in a cognitive environment. Well, Jews shared a similar idea. So how they thought about origins was very similar to the ancient world. It's just the distinctions are what they say in the story really stand out, like one God just decides to do it, and so forth. So what I'm about to say are some distinctions of Yahweh and the ancient world, but I'm not trying to diminish that sometimes they do think about God in similar ways that their neighbors did, who are not Jews. But to spare time, I'm going to zone in on some of the huge distinctions. Does that make sense so far? I can say, my wife is a lot like women. She does this, and she has brown hair, and she's like da-da-da-da-da. Or I can say, my wife is different from other women in these ways. And this is the difference here. Okay. In the ancient Near East, gods operated in a pantheon. A pantheon, of course, means a large group of gods. And they made decisions in a divine assembly. They took a vote, the original committee from heaven, who voted on everything. So when the gods had to make decisions, they all got together. Come on in, gods, or a version or a portion of the gods, or the gods and their, you might say, chief authority, their cabinet. So it was the first thing one of the first things the president's supposed to do was what? You appoint your cabinet. You get all the people in order, which I think Trump is still doing, but that's a different story. But that's the idea, is fairly soon on, you start bringing your cabinet right away to make decisions. And they called these characters the assembly of the holy ones, like in Psalm 89:5. And most scholars, okay, I said I was going to tell them a sermon, but now you're going to be way ahead of the crowd, and I'll say it now. When God says, let us make man in our image, almost every Old Testament scholar means, they say what that means is God in his holy assembly. He's gathering together all of his creatures that are heavenly for him to declare the decision. Let us make. So that is corporate. We might go, I don't get it, why do you do that? That's how they thought. That's their cognitive environment. Because everyone thought that way about the gods. But there are major distinctions with Yahweh. Big distinctions. Okay, the first is this. They're always in a group. God is not in a group. God doesn't take a vote. Of course, and the other gods behave like humans. They were just like the days of our lives, all the way up to the Greeks and Romans. They had affairs with each other, they killed each other, they had babies, they fought each other, they bickered, they slept, they woke up, some died, some were reborn. That's how the other gods worked in the ancient world all the time. Like in Hinduism. But in Judaism, Yahweh's power is absolute. It is not shared, ever. Ever. So look at Deuteronomy 10:17. Let's look at some examples here so we see this is a very big distinction. Deuteronomy 10:17. Deuteronomy 10:17, and you'll learn, because last week those who came, you know your Hebrew now. Deuteronomy 10:17 says, for, you see the Lord is all capital letters there? For Yahweh your God is the God of gods. Yahweh your El, I think it's our Elohim, I don't have my Hebrew in front of me, I should have brought that. Yahweh your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who is not partial and takes no bribe. So he's the big dog. He doesn't share any power or authority with anybody. Go to chapter 32:39. 32:39. See now that I, even I am he, there is no God besides me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. And no one can deliver from my hand. And he goes on for a while there. The point is, in relation to the other gods that everyone else believed in, Yahweh is saying, I don't share my authority with other gods. I don't need a vote. I don't need permission. So that the text, typically, other gods aren't presented as non-existent. They just don't possess adequate power or authority, which means they don't deserve to be worshipped. And that's what the ancient Jews keep saying over and over. Why are you worshiping them? They're weak. Another big difference is Yahweh is personal. People can relate directly to Him. Ancient people didn't think that way about their gods. The gods are up there doing what gods do. Just chilling, partying, fighting, eating, because you make food in the sacrifice that feeds the gods. You give them water. You serve their needs. But you don't relate to them. You don't say, well, if you're from the South, you say Baal, but it's Baal. Baal means something like Lord, but like Lord of the Flies, basically. Lord or boss. Baal is Beelzebul, that's what it comes from, by the way. You don't relate to Baal. Baal's not my heavenly Father, and I worship Him, and He talks to me, and He answers to my prayer. That's not how they thought about the ancient gods. Yahweh comes along and acts like He can be related to directly, all through the Old Testament. Yahweh goes to Moses. I'm going to preach on this in about a month or two. He goes to Moses. That's a big deal that he's like, what's up? The God of Judaism and Christianity is a God who reveals Himself. He wants to be known. He wants to be known. He wants us to know Him. And that is different in the ancient world. They did not think that way about the gods. God has completely free will. Completely free will. No outside force, energy, or being ever compels or thwarts Him. Ever. Ever. For example, He creates alone. There's no war, no input, no material birth, etc. Almost every other person thought that when the gods created the universe, it was out of a fight. Most well known is a Babylonian epic called Enuma Elish, which means one on high. And Marduk and Tiamat are the gods and battle it out. And Marduk kills Tiamat and breaks up his body in two halves. And his body becomes the land. His blood becomes the oceans. That's a common kind of story. It's the most popular one at the time. That's not what happens in the Old Testament, ever. He doesn't need someone's opinion. No one forces him. No one compels him. Let that sink in for a little bit. God has boundaries. God is not a genie in a bottle. He's not a Santa Claus. He does whatever He wants to do. Good news for us is He's good. But He does whatever He wants to do. I want that to really sink in as much as we can, sister and brother, because we are not His boss. He's not our buddy. Never in the Bible is He presented as our buddy or our servant. And that's exactly what's happened in the last century. He has complete free will. Ancient gods didn't have free will. They were compelled to. They had forces at work, like justice and other things, that compelled them to behave. In the Old Testament, that's not how God works. Nothing compels Him. He acts out of His own character, and that is unique. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question turned on this picture. Because I always heard when I learned I was growing up, Satan, the devil, whatever you want to call him, Beelzebub, he was one of God's angels at one time. That's what I always heard. And he wanted to become equal or above God. So God cast him out, right? And he supposedly took a host of angels with him. What point in time during all this did this happen? Did this happen after God created the heavens and the earth and put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? Did it happen before that, after that? Or does it even tell us? Or did it even actually happen?
These are good questions. So to repeat briefly, you've been told that Satan is a being created by God who wants to rebel, wants to be like God or usurp His authority.
Right.
He and his fellow disciple, angel bad guys, get cast down. When did this happen, or did it happen at all?
I mean, what is the existence of Satan? I mean, how did it come about? I mean, that's what I always learned, was taught as a child.
There's a particular week on Revelation I studied where I unpacked all of this, all the issue of Satan's on Revelation. It's online, and I can maybe send you the link. If you'll remind me, I can find that exact study if you want, and I can. Because I only spent 30, 45 minutes talking about all this. The short of the answer is the The myth, okay, to unpack all these words. When I say myth, I don't mean pretend. In scholarship, we mean that to mean a grand story or narrative that proves some kind of point. The story or the myth about Satan turning evil and being cast down is a very late development in Judaism. It is not in the Old Testament anywhere. And so people always say that. They say, well, Satan, no, he was in the garden. No, he's not. No, he's not. And next week when Paul preaches, he'll probably talk about that. Later on, Jews start looking back to Genesis and go, I bet that serpent was fueled by Satan. But the person who wrote Genesis didn't think that. No one in the Old Testament thought that. The idea that a corrupted figure has rebelled comes much later in ancient Judaism. The story of Satan that a lot of people have passed down in the churches, a lot of it does not come from the Bible. It comes from other Jewish literature written between the Testaments.
I know, because I've never found it in the Bible. So
Good for you for looking. Good for you. Yeah, it's not there. But because it's such a sacrosanct, special thing that people have told all their lives, when I say these kind of things, for a lot of people, it's just a very upsetting thing. The closest we get to the idea that this demonic or this evil, it's a figure who does evil. Evil is not a thing. Kind of is, but not really. Evil is not a thing. Creatures do the wrong thing, and we call those creatures evil. When these creatures did evil and cast down, the closest we get to that kind of story or myth being told is in Revelation. For the Christian. Now, Jews have other stories about it, but the Christians' earliest stories in Revelation. There's one reference in Matthew, but I explain this in the Stone Revelation. Jesus sends the 72 his disciples out, they do mission, he comes back, and he says, I saw demons cast out. They're all like, woo, it's party time. We healed the sick. The blind couldn't see. They're going crazy. Woo! And Jesus celebrates by saying, and I saw Satan fall from the heavens.
But he is in the Old Testament because he tempted Job.
You said he is in the Old Testament because he tempted Job. No, he didn't.
According to that story. I
beg to differ, respectfully. No, if you read Job carefully, Satan never tempts Job. Doesn't tempt him. The Greek word for tempt is diabolos, devil. He's the tempter. That attribute of him, that characteristic attributed to him, takes time in Judaism to develop. And it probably developed when they came back from Babylonian exile. Probably at the earliest. And that's when they started developing. And a lot of scholars think that's because in Babylon, where there's Zoroastrianism, they have a very developed angelology and demonology. And they probably adapted some of their ideas of these bad angelic beings. And they started attributing it to this Ha-Satan, the accusing one. So the closest we get is Revelation. And in the New Testament, there are about 3 or 4 major time periods or events where it is said that Satan's authority was defeated. And I explain all this in the Revelation study. Some gospel writers, like Matthew, he puts it on Matthew Jesus when the mission of the disciples occur. That's when his authority falls. And other texts, like I think it's in Luke and in Revelation, it's at the death of Jesus. Some say it's his resurrection and ascension, like in John. And so you have different times, events, they give the credit when evil really was defeated. Some say, probably like Mark's gospel, it's at the temptation narrative. So you have different events. So I don't put a lot of faith in that narrative, and I don't have much evidence for it, especially people, and I've heard this a lot, because I do a lot of podcasts, I get a lot of questions on Twitter and stuff, and people will say, no, because Satan really, there's a whole narrative. He wanted to be like God, and he went around and rallied all the forces of the demon, and it goes on, and I go, my mom's response always is, maybe. How do you know that?
Yeah, and I've always wondered where that came from.
Where did that come from? And I tell you, most of it comes from other Jewish sources that are not in the Bible. So to me, that's problematic. It doesn't mean it's false. It just means I don't think other Jewish sources are as authoritative as the Bible. And so that's problematic for me. So if you want more there, I'd be happy to send you that little Revelation study. These are great questions. I wish I had more definitive there. But by the New Testament, this satanic figure is one who tempts. He wants people to fail. He wants them to sin.
Right.
In the Old Testament, that's not his job. He's never ever described that way. He's barely talked about in the Old Testament. Barely.
But like Job reads something to the effect where God's having a conversation with the devil or something.
Right. Well, not the
God says,
devil.
have you ever considered my servant
Right.
Job?
Mm-hmm. That's in Job chapter 1, yeah. Right off the
Right.
bat. He has his divine assembly together. His assembly, like his parliament, his cabinet.
Right.
And the Hasatan creature is one of them. And they're talking about stuff. And the Hasatan just means the accusing one. He's a prosecuting
Okay.
attorney. They're chit-chatting. He's like, hey, did you ever consider Job?
See, that makes more sense than what I was taught. And I never really believed it, but I always wondered, where did this come from?
The best, you can go online if you want to listen to a whole presentation, like about, I think it's 12, 13, 14, 15, short 20, 30-minute lectures, introductions to Job by John Walton, for free on YouTube. That's worth the money. It's worth it, believe me. Just go John Walton, Job. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think, I don't think we had any Bible stories in my house, except the one where the devil was in, I would say heaven, but I don't think so. But he was surrounded by all these other angels, and he thought he was beautiful. He thought he was the most beautiful, and you know, they were. Did you have that one too?
Yeah.
Well, you know, those stories kind of stick with you, and you wonder about them. But I didn't have any of the good stories. We just had that one.
So the only story you have in your house is the one of Satan or the devil, and he's in the heavens, and he thinks he's beautiful, and I don't have any good stories.
Yeah, I guess I've been to.
Yeah, but if I'll move on very quickly, but just to say very quickly before I move on, thank you for sharing that, because there's a lot of things I've said, well, I guess it's about 20 years of ministry now. I say all the time, there are a lot of church legends, a lot of them, and I encounter them at every church and every denomination I've ever been a part of. And so they're out there, and I'm not the legend police, I'm not, but I encounter them all the time, and I'm just encouraging that there's usually the response to when we found out something's a legend that's nowhere to be found in the Bible. For some people, the pendulum swings so far, and they go, then what else is not true? I've heard my entire life. I've heard that many times. To those people, if that encounters any of you, or on my podcast, take a breath, be encouraged. I'm sure you believe a lot of things that are true. The other pendulum is to say, I don't care, I've been told it all my life, it doesn't matter what it says, and I'm going to believe it. Okay, you can do that too. But just don't teach that to people if I were you, because that's false teaching. And I can point you to Jesus where he says, don't teach that. James says teachers will be judged more harshly, and so don't teach false legends. So then what do I do, David? Well, we do the best job we can of looking up things we've been told. I'll confess, a few years ago, my brother-in-law, who's a pastor in Florida, called me up. He said, hey, you know the thing we always told people, you've heard the thing, right, where in the Old Testament and the temple and the Holy of Holies, the chief priest once a year would go in there and tie a rope around his waist so that if he died, they could drag the body out. And I go, yeah, I've told people that for years. He goes, where is that? And I go, I have no idea.
It's in the Bible.
I guess it's the Bible. And he goes, well, look it up, because I can't find it anywhere. And the answer is, it's not in the Bible. It's a church legend. And I go, well, dadgummit. Thankfully, there aren't that many things in my life that's ever happened, because I was too ignorant. So as I learned the Bible, I learned it from specialists, and that was good. I was more of an empty tank. But that happens to me too, and I go, oh, well, I just learned my lesson. I'll never say that again.
I'm going to look that up, because I'm almost sure.
I'm almost sure. Look it up. Look it up. Okay.
We report next week.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Play next week. His power is absolute. He is personal. He has completely free will. Nothing makes him do anything. Well, David, why pray? You're not manipulating God. You're asking God. You're asking. You're not making him do anything. A little footnote there, I think I say this now, maybe later on, but right there. That's almost certainly why God says in the Big Ten Commandments, do not make images of me. Ancient people believed, when you made the idols and images, which I'll talk about this week in the sermon, that if you're real nice to that idol, that image, you can manipulate the gods. I'll wash the god's feet, anoint it, give it food. Yahweh says, no, not because I want you to wash my feet, because I don't want you to think you can manipulate me. You can't do that. I'm not like those other stinking gods, so don't do things like you do to other gods. Don't try to worship me like they worship their gods, because it tells me that you think things about me that are false. That's what I preached on a couple weeks ago on false worship. You don't worship like those other people, because not on everything, but in certain things you don't do it, because it demonstrates you don't know who I am. Okay, so nothing's going to make him do anything. You can't compel him, you can't thwart him, it's going to happen. He has independent existence. There's a fancy word there, and that's the word is aseity. God has aseity. He has necessary independent existence. He is not contingent. My children are contingent. I am contingent. I came from somewhere. My body came from a zygote, which came from an egg and sperm, so that my whole physical appearance is contingent. My soul almost certainly was created by God himself, which means no matter how you look at it, I'm contingent. Even if you don't think a soul is created, but it's kind of a broken off soulish state all the way back to the first, fine, I'm still contingent. I don't necessarily exist. I came into existence. God is not like that. God in the Bible has no parents, nor babies. Muslims think when we say Jesus is God's son, they go, that's horrible. He can't have babies, he didn't have sex. And we go, no, that's not what he meant. They really allow him to think that. But anyway, he's not contingent. He had no beginning. He necessarily exists. Does that make sense? No parents. No parents. And while there are a few feminine metaphors are used for Yahweh, there are a few of them, metaphors, only masculine pronouns and terms are used. Probably to maintain transcendence and personhood. He's only referred to as he. He will do, he will do. Why do you Christians always call him he? How do you know anything? Well, because one is, that's what he says about himself. He refers to himself as the he, and everyone else always did. And Jews always did. Why did they do that? Well, we're never told why. But probably it's always the he pronoun. What we know for a fact is God the Father has no DNA. He has no male chromosomes. Let's get real clear about this. God the Father and God the Spirit are not male. A lot of women have a hard time with religion, certainly theistic, Jew, Islam, or Christian, because their father molested them or beat them or whatever, and I don't want to do it, and Heavenly Father, it's just bad news for them. I'm here to tell you that doesn't count for Christianity, for sure, not Judaism either. God is not a dude. He's not a man. So when we say he, we don't mean he's a man. He doesn't have chromosomes. He can't have babies. Jesus could have, but God the Father and God the Spirit could not have. And God the Son in the Old Testament era could not have had babies because of no. That's one thing is, so who cares? Well, in the ancient world, in ancient Near East, almost all, well, no, every other culture had female gods as well. Usually it was a god and the god's consort or lover. Like Baal had Asherah. That was his bae. If your old bae means like your girlfriend, or your wife. Anyway, but that's for you right there. That's for all you baes. Chuck is your bae. Tell him that. What'd you learn tonight? That you're my bae. What up? So, the Jews probably thought, we don't want to think that we were birthed by God, because that's what they thought in their ancient stories of how humans came about. They could have babies, and out popped the first humans. And nope, no, we don't want to do that, because fathers can't have babies, so we're not babies of the fathers. We're not broken off pieces. But also it defines, I think if someone who protects and oversees a family, they did, it was father figure. That's probably why they did it, but we're not told exactly why. That's what transcendence. Transcendence means other. Not far out there, but other. He can't give us birth. Any questions or comments about that at all? He reveals, yes ma'am, go ahead, please.
Well, if God is not male, then why do we refer to him as he and him?
History.
Well, one reason is because that's how the Jews spoke about him. Two, as Christians, because that's how Jesus spoke about him. Three, because when he refers to himself, he can use male metaphors and male pronouns. And so, if I remember, I can't remember the quote right now. But in other words, It's just always consistently he or him throughout Old and New Testament, every book. There's never a time he's called she. He's never called Mother Earth. So that's why we do it, because an enormous historical precedent. But the why past that is what I was just saying. We don't know exactly why, but probably to make sure that God is not considered a she, because other, like Egyptians and Canaanites and so forth, their gods could be she. And those gods could give birth to the earth and give birth to humans. The Jews didn't think that. We have a distance from God the Father, transcendence. Also because he or him, men, in that time period, and most time periods around the world, represented provision and protection. Provision and protection. The Father did. The Mother did provide provision and protection, and the same with the Father did. So that metaphor rang true. They could use feminine metaphors. They could. And I give you, I think, every reference there is in the Old Testament. And Jesus himself says, like a hen gathers the chicks under her, if only Jerusalem you would have let me, in Matthew. Well, he doesn't think he's a she, or it's a metaphor. So metaphors are used, or an analogy, but when they're talking to God directly, or about God directly, it is always he. Again, probably to distinguish from the other gods, he's not a she, don't give babies, and two, because it's provision and protection and so forth. He reveals in unique episodes in history. All the ancient gods didn't work that way. They were associated with the crops. They were the corn kings, as C.S. Lewis calls them. They were not cyclical patterns. They believed the gods could be born, then die, and start all over all the time. And that's why in Baal and your fertility crops, you had to have we're all adults here, you had to have a whole lot of sex with the temple prostitutes to help the gods remember, oh yeah, it's time to be fertile myrtle, as my father-in-law says, fertile myrtle, to get the crops to grow. So you had to do that to start the cycle all over again. And that's what I learned happens in Kansas up until last year. Farmers did the same thing. I'm just kidding.
You're just in for listening.
I'm just in listening. Some of you are not, I just make sure. So God the Father reveals in unique episodes in history. And as C.S. Lewis says of Aslan, I don't like to do it the same way twice. He reveals himself over time, but he doesn't start all over every season. I'm telling you that is different. People didn't think that way about the gods. They treated God, Yahweh, Father, like he's a person who, like a real being, like I would meet, you meet me every once in a while. I don't start all over the day like Groundhog Day every time I meet you over and over and over. That's what they believe about their gods. Say, no, you meet God, you build a history with him. You build a relationship with him. He says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember those guys way back when? Your ancestors? I was there too. And I'm going to be ahead when I go here. And here comes Jesus, worshiping the same God the Father, as it were, or paying homage to, particularly in John's God.
Weren't they just the gods, or the God is a person of authority? Isn't that kind of why you think of him as a male?
Oh, why do you think of him as a male, as a person of authority? That's one reason, probably so. One of a person of authority. Because the fact is they didn't see women as authoritative. Mostly did not. Ancient people did not. Middle Eastern people did not. Still don't. Yeah, so if you want someone with authority, you got to give him a male pronoun. Not it, but him. And that's also why we don't call God an it. Because he's not revealed as an it in the Bible. He's never called it, ever. And if you know your languages, Hebrew and Greek, or Spanish has inflective, right? Amigo, amigos, that you have male and female and neuter and so forth. Well, that's how it is in Hebrew and Greek, which is primarily the languages of the Old New Testament, Hebrew and Greek. They're inflective too. They have male and female, and it's always male. It's always male. Even when the Spirit is spoken of, in Greek, pneuma is neuter, but when it uses a pronoun, it's he. Not an it. Anyway. Unique episodes in history, he has perfect moral character. None of the other ancient gods have perfect moral character. None of them. They're just as fragile and sinful as Cassidy. They're just as bad as every... Cassidy's over there. I was a joke, Martin. He waved his hand at you. They really are. They're like the days of our lives. They're just as bad as everybody else. God the Father in the Old Testament, and of course God the Son and God the Spirit, all through the Bible, they're never represented as doing the wrong thing. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. And I'm telling you that is unique. No one talked about the gods that way. He forms formal relationships, and that's bizarre too. They didn't do that with formal relationships with a person. I will be your God, you will be my people. I like how, as John Walden's son who said, when God said, I'll be your God and you are my people, that is just as monumental as the incarnation. That he locked him himself in a relationship, like a marriage relationship. It was unheard of in the world. It never happened before. And so he's jealous. Don't do that. Don't sleep around, you might say. Don't worship other gods. Other gods and other religions didn't care about all that stuff. There's a pantheon. There's a whole bunch of them. You can worship Zeus and whoever. That's the Romans, but whatever. And he's not like humans in their fickleness, where they eat dinner. I'm just kidding. Failings, frailty, like lust, sexuality, deception. Yahweh is never, ever presented that way. And every other god and every other religion is. He is completely other. And they made up a word for that. That is God-kind and other from humans. You know that word. You know what it is. Holy. Holy. That means of God, basically. Associated with God. It's other than. Holy doesn't mean distant. It's not past Pluto, which no longer is apparently a planet. But it's not out there. It just means he's other. Like my fine china. It's other. It's not paper plates. It's holy. I say that everybody comes over. You're eating on holy. I don't say that. I'm just kidding. And he's utterly dependable and faithful. Other gods are not faithful and they're not dependable because they're fickle and they're frail and they forget and they can be manipulated. And they can lie to you. Yahweh never does that. And there's one word I've used a lot in sermons, and I will use it forever because it's all over the Old Testament, and it's pronounced chesed. Chesed. It's typically translated loving kindness, covenant faithfulness, loyal love, something like that. It's the word that describes, and you've heard me say this, I'm going to keep saying because this is good stuff. This is one of the this might be the number one, or it is certainly one of the top descriptions of God in the Old Testament. He has chesed. When you have a contract or a covenant between two parties, Hayden and I will drive you to school if you'll empty the dishwasher. I will do blank if. And Hayden goes, deal, high five. And I drive him to school, and he does not do the dishwasher. I wait till the next morning. Did you do the dishwasher? And I still drive him to school. He broke his part of the deal, but I upheld my part of the covenant, my contract. What do I call this concept of where I do my part of the deal when he doesn't do his part of the deal? Chesed. Chesed. And that's, he's utterly dependable and faithful. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. Sarah, don't laugh at me. You're going to have a baby. Whatevs. Moses, you're going to go down there and let my people, whatever. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. Okay. Those are some key distinctions of God, particularly God the Father, in the Old Testament particularly. Any questions or comments about that? All right. How are we doing? A lot of sleepy faces. How are we doing? Can you stand up and stretch? I'm just looking at you.
I'm confused here. So the Trinity version of this, what you're teaching, all Christians don't believe in the Trinitarian, or do they?
Do all Christians...
I know I'm kind of backing up here.
That's okay. No, this is good. Do all Christians believe in the Trinity?
Yeah.
All Christians should believe in the Trinity. Christians think false things and still are Christians. Christians should think about the Trinity. If you're a Christian and you want to fit into what's called orthodoxy, classic, true teaching of the church handed down for 2,000 years, you need to believe in Trinity. But if you don't, it means you're just ignorant. You've never been taught that much. But if you know what you should believe and deliberately hold a contrarian view, and you know you're holding a contrarian view, that's called a heretic. Which means then I would say you're no longer a Christian.
What about in the case where you hold to the biblical teaching of who God is hold to the uniqueness of Jesus as deity, the Holy Spirit as deity, the Father as deity. You can't separate them, but do not express it necessarily using the word Trinity or the doctrine of Trinity, aren't familiar with the doctrinal teaching, but hold to what Scripture says of the deity of Jesus and does not depart from that.
That's a very good, great question. Is what if you hold to biblical teaching and explain it maybe a little more in biblical vocabulary, but don't explain it in Trinitarian vocabulary? To that I would say is what I told him the first thing, which is then a person should believe in it, but they might be, well, I'd say a few things. One is they should learn how to talk about it in Trinitarian talk, because the church for 2,000 years and all three major branches all agree on this fundamental point. He's a triune being. So we ought to try to do that. Does that mean if a person knows they ought to and don't want to do it and just want to use biblical stuff, are they still a Christian? I would think, sure, absolutely. The reason why I think that is because Trinitarian talk wasn't in the New Testament. Right? They didn't go around, Peter and James didn't go around, you get Father, Son, and Spirit, it's a Trinity, and they're co-equal. They didn't bring up a Greek term. That became later on. Now, there are Christians who disagree with me on that and go, no. If you do not articulate a Trinitarian Christian theology, you're not a Christian. I don't find that compelling. I always go, then what do you do with all of the disciples in the ministry of Jesus who could not articulate a Trinity? As far as we can know, maybe they did. They never recorded it. I don't think so. I think they could not. I don't think Jesus around a campfire said, here's how the Trinity worked. I don't think he did. So can you be a Christian and believe in Trinitarian ideas, equal Father, Son, and Spirit? Jesus is not a creature. He's the God-man. I think absolutely, based on the New Testament. Should Christians today try to learn how to talk about it using orthodox terms? I think they should. Can you still be a Christian if you don't want to learn all that? Yeah, it just means you're more of a baby Christian in that area. Can a person know it's the right thing to do and know what orthodoxy is and still reject it? No.
As far as being more of a baby Christian, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that off the top, because I think it might depend on the culture and where you are as well. Whether, like, here, I mean, yeah, okay, that's a big thing in our culture and within the church, and because the church is a big thing that's discussed about. So being able to talk about it in those sorts of ways is helpful. In other cultures, that they read the Scripture and you're, well, that's who Jesus is. Clearly, he's not created, he's deity, and just accepts that more wholeheartedly. I don't know then that necessarily be considered immature without using sort of our style of talking of Trinity.
All right, so it might depend on I hate repeating you. It might, if I understand correctly, it might depend on the context and the country and the language and all that, depending on how they talk about it. We might agree, might disagree. Maybe it's an issue of nuance. I don't think that a person has to use Latin terms to demonstrate their maturity. I do think they have to understand which way I got there yet, but there are certain things a Christian needs to understand in maturity that God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit are. Their qualities and characteristics. So if a person does not know some of these basic characteristics that go with Father, Son, and Spirit, not because they're being rebellious, just because they're ignorant, I would say is in that area, then you're immature.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the more we learn it, the more we want to know it. And that's very different from how much we want to talk about it. So we might go to a culture where dumping all this right. Well, I waited on purpose for over a year before I started teaching this, so I don't want to quote unquote dump it because it's a big topic. But now that you're here, as we learn it, so let's say you finish all the study and you go, I heard all that. It's false. I don't believe in any of it. I'd say that's unfortunate, and I would really like to talk if possible. That's very different from saying a person says, I haven't heard this before, I'm still learning. That's great. It just means you're growing up. Remember, in my mind at least, immature doesn't mean bad. It just means immature. Mature means I'm not grown up fully in the area. That's all I mean by that. It's not a judgment statement of shame. It's just, that's all it is. Some people know a lot of Bible facts in this one area, and yet they lie all the time. Well, they're immature in this character issue or whatever. I mean, there's different levels on different areas of life. And, I am going to say this. One of the greatest frustrations for church leaders that I face is the constant assumption that having Bible fact knowledge equals Christian maturity. That is not true. It is not true. Bible facts are very important. I gave my life to it. That does not make me a mature Christian. Jesus did not say, go baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit, and learn Bible facts. He says, teach them to do what? Obey what I said. We need to obey things. That means we've got to apply it. So I know all the facts I want and go straight to hell. That is irrelevant. Knowledge alone does not save anybody. Anyway, I'll stop preaching for a second. Were you going to say?
No, I think I'm trying to be pretty basic here, but I've always
Good.
pictured God as just an old dude, ever since I was younger. Now I'm kind of understanding this. The movie like the Avatar where they're talking to that olive tree or whatever, it's not a being. That's kind of how I'm morphing into this now, and like it's more of a...
That's a great... So you grew up thinking kind of God's...
Oh yeah, some old dude, and every time
particularly in pictures and art, we say that he's used a white hair, beard...
Yeah, exactly. That's tattooed in my mind.
Yeah. So the question is, can you have an image of God the Father that is false and still be Christian? Yes. Can you still believe in God as He is and have a false image? Yeah. That's just a visualization.
Oh no, I'm maturing up now.
You're very mature. I can see you growing right now. I can see it. You're almost in puberty. You're almost yeah. So we can have false images. I know we can because almost everyone, we all do. I mean, none of us, as far as I understand, we've not fully known God yet, not this side of the world to come. Which means we've got to have some false assumptions about the way we think about things. So the issue is, how false can it be? And one's based on ignorance, one is based on rebellion. And that's the distinction I'm making over and over.
Right.
One based on ignorance is immaturity. One based on rebellion is heresy. We don't want to be heretics. And that's why I tend to say over and over, I'm picky when you say, well, if God became flesh. No.
You know what tree I'm talking about in the Avatar movie, right?
Avatar, yes. and the movie called Avatar, which I think is still the top grossing movie of all time now. There's one big tree.
It's like a mother tree.
Mother tree.
It doesn't talk. It's not a being. It's not anything.
It's like James Cameron. It's this Mother Earth. Fill the throw. Blah blah nonsense. But yeah, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, God is a being. A being. So if you're going to have to choose.
Okay, so now I'm getting confused.
He's a being. If you had to choose between a tree and a dude with a beard,
I got the dude with the beard.
Go with the dude with the beard. Go with the dude with the beard every time.
See, I like this simple talk here. Now
Absolutely. If you got to choose, go with that, because the dude with the beard has a will and a desire, wants things, has free will, is a he, is perfect moral character, all the things we just talked about. Trees don't do that, no matter the movie. Now, this is good.
Using that as a metaphor, but yes.
No, I got you. No, I got you. Well, I use the analogy because this is a real one, which is Mother Earth. Or it's very popular. C.S. Lewis said this, 67 years ago. This cosmic force, this life force. I mean, he says, religion with all the thrills, but no risk. It's the God. It's Oprah's God. It's Oprah's God. It's the God who wants to bless you. You put good thoughts out there, it's going to return. The universe wants to make you happy, wants to make you blessed. That kind of stuff. That's Mother Earth. That's the same. It's just warmed over in different vocabulary. That's that tree. That just wants everybody to get along and live and attach little things.
I'll let you get off this subject,
Yeah.
but you just kind of threw me off the curveball here when you said in the Old Testament he still was an old guy. But now in the New Testament it's Trinity, or what? It's not Trinity in the Old Testament too, or what?
So is the New Testament I think I understand. Let me just, instead of repeating the question, I think I understand.
He's still in the Old Testament is talked about as being a being, right?
Is God a being in the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but now
He's not a
Trinity
cosmic force.
come in the Old Testament?
In the Old Testament, God, in the Old Testament era, when it was being composed and the events of which they speak, which is before it was composed,
Right.
God the Father, Son, and Spirit existed as Trinity. Now, we hadn't defined Trinity just yet. We've got to move up to it. He is a Trinitarian being.
Okay.
But that had not fully been revealed yet.
We weren't using any term.
We weren't using term for Trinity yet. They weren't the terms for Son.
They were just describing them all.
Just describing as best as his God. I mean, I felt like when I came to church here, the first time I talked to people, no one had met my wife yet. But we're a unit, not literally. I mean, the analogy breaks down. The point is, but you only know David. And then until my wife chooses to reveal herself, all this time, did your wife exist before I met her? Yeah, she existed. Well, where was she? She was always there. You didn't have a name to her. I knew her. Well, all of a sudden, two little rugrats running. You had kids? Had they existed before I met them? Yeah, they existed before you met them. You just met them. I choose to reveal them in stages
I got you.
of awesomeness. Well, that's how God is. God the Father, Son, and Spirit exist, but in the Old Testament, He's not spoken of exactly. He reveals Himself. And we call that theology progressive revelation. He reveals more of Himself over time. When He meets Abram, or he's called Abraham eventually. Abram, He didn't reveal much of Himself. Very, very little. And then with Moses, a little more. King David, the prophets, a little more. And then, of course, Jesus. Bagoosh. I mean, we're just, if you really want to know what He's like.
We're not very bright as beings in general, so He's trying to feed us little bits at a time.
He's trying to feed us a little bit at a time. Yeah, we actually don't know why He did a little at a time. C.S. Lewis says what you just said, which is a lot of theologians do. I'm going to C.S. Lewis because, well, there's a reason why. He condescends to us. I'm glad.
As He should.
I'm glad He should. Well, I'm glad He does. Good. So He is a being. We should not think of God the Father, Son, or Spirit as cosmic forces, like the laws of gravity or something. And it's just not like that. He's an independent being. To Christians, we say it is, and Jews would probably say it. God the Father, Son, and the Spirit are soulish. They are a soul. He doesn't have a body. He has a soul. He is pure soul. He's a spiritual being. I know you want to draw a picture of him on the wall, but I can't. God the Father doesn't have a shape.
Well, as important as all of this is to the theology of Christians, this you think that, people would be talking about it more or teaching this more. This is the first that I've really heard of it. That's
first you ever heard of that?
Well, then taught the right way.
Unfortunately, it depends where you go to church. Yeah. And I have a lot of opinions about why it's not being taught. And it starts with leaders being overwhelmingly incompetent for the job. They don't know what they're doing. Most leaders are completely ignorant. And the reason why is there's a lot of reasons why. They love Jesus, or they're kind, or they sell the gospel as a get rich quick, whatever. They're not trained. They don't go to school. And then they look down on people who do go to school. You don't need all that. I've had people tell me that over and over and over. It's a waste of time. So there's a lot of reasons. It starts with that sense of we don't need all that. Then people don't want to hear that. Runs them off. Who cares? And so there's a lot of reasons why that I will give. I can't put in the science laboratory, but I think so. But now you're here.
They wouldn't be very good tour guides.
Not be very good tour guides. They're not the tour guides I want.
Right.
They're not the tour guides I want. I want someone who's thought a little bit about it and done a little bit of reading, if possible. And you're going to go out here and go, David thinks that all these pastors aren't Christians. They're doing a horrible job on us. They're just like he is. No, I don't think that. Oh my goodness. You could be... No. There are hard-working Christian leaders all around the world who don't have the ability to go to school. They don't have the... When I was in Moscow a few years ago, this Christian leadership thing I was asked to be a part of, which was a great honor. I mean, these people, they're doing the best they can with what they got. And they became Christian. All of a sudden, they're full-time jobs. Now they're pastors of these small, growing churches where people don't want to be Christians, and it is a struggle. So I'm not talking about people who can't help it. I'm fussing at people who can help it and deliberately reject it because they think it's irrelevant, but not people who can't help it. I remember one pastor said he was in somewhere in Africa. I hate saying somewhere in Africa, but it was in Africa. And he was talking to a bunch of Christian pastors, but they were kind of baby Christians in the last few years. And he starts talking about the Bible. They don't know anything about the Bible, not much. And he goes, well, do you know much about Genesis? And he goes, no, tell us. So they sit there, and he goes through an outline of that, then Exodus and Leviticus and on. They go, tell us more, for 12 hours, day after day, for several days in a row. They do all day long. And so we do an outline of every single biblical book. Could you do that? That's how ignorant we are, by the way. That's how bad it is, how biblically illiterate. So he does it. They're starving to learn about it, but they're pastors themselves. So I'm not making fun of them and vitiating the hard work. They love Jesus. I'm fussing at people who should know better. And that's in-house. I'm not judging. That's in-house. That's my little frustration. Okay, I want to say this very quickly, and then we'll move on, if we can, row number 5. Unless there's any questions or comments. Anything at all. You really can ask anything. Last week we were talking about Roman Catholicism and Islam, so we brought up all kinds of cool stuff. Dumb thing? We like dumb things in this loft. What's said in the loft stays in the loft.
Okay.
And Facebook.
Oh,
And the podcast.
don't mention my name.
No one's listening.
Don't
No,
tag me.
believe me, no one's listening.
You said he's not cosmic and all
Yes.
that jazz, but isn't there some old saying like, there's three more present, the Lord's there? So on church every Sunday morning, how is he present every single time in every single church if he's not magical?
Very good question. No, it's a very good question because it forces me to nuance more when I need to do that, so thank you for that. I said, well, what I said was, God is not a cosmic energy force like gravity. I didn't say he's not cosmic, period. Therefore, he's not present. It's not that. It's not like, he's not a cosmic energy force out there. As people, he's the universe, or he's this chi. That's what the Chinese would call him, chi. The flow, the Tao is the flow of chi through the nonsense. That's absolute false. That's not the God who really exists. So he's not an energy source like a battery source of the universe we get to plug into by meditating. And all of a sudden it's not like the force of Star Wars. Right? The force will be with you. That's what I'm saying negative on that. Is God present? Yes. And to use more fancy words, in Christian theology, we always hold these two words together. One is transcendence. I think I'm spelling that correctly without spell check. And immanence. I think it's with an E. I have spelled that a long time without having a spell check. Transcendence and eminence. Transcendence just means, like I said before, like holy is other. Completely other. Transcendent is beyond description. What was it like being in love the first time? Oh, it was a transcendent experience. It's something other. I don't want to describe it. These chemical reactions. No. It's like butterflies in my stomach. Yeah, butterflies, that's gross. No, it was like that. It's a simile. It's transcendent. Imminent is the opposite. Imminence or imminent means right in your face. Destruction is imminent. It means it's going to happen any second. In Christian theology, we say this about God. God is both transcendent and imminent, depending on the context. God the Father, Son, and Spirit are transcendent in that they are other. They are not like us. God the Son got the closest there is to us, because he has a human nature as well. But God the Father in particular is absolute transcendent. The way the ancient Jews, and modern Jews, and Christians like to emphasize his immanence is by talking about God's Spirit. The Spirit is immanent. So typically, not always, in the Bible, when they want to emphasize God's transcendence and so other, you talk about the holy presence. Rarely anybody can ever get there. You have to be ritually pure and clean, and all. It takes a lot to get to his presence without not making it. And so they always have these mediators, like the Melech Yahweh, the angel of the Lord showed up and talked to Moses. But the angel talks like he's God. Well, is that really God? Or is it an angel talking as if he's God? It's because he's too transcendent. I saw God. The next verse says he saw an angel. Well, he's trying to keep transcendence. Because he's so other, he's so holy. Or rather, he is holy. Not so holy, he just is. I'm saying so unique that he is unique. Imminence means he's up in my grill. And every once in a while, he is imminent. He's imminent at the burning bush. And Moses meets God the Father on the side of a mountain. Not Horeb or Sinai, depending on the narrative you read. And he's imminent there. We meet Jesus. Jesus is very, very imminent. In Christianity, we believe, because the New Testament teaches, that when we confess our sins, repent, which you did, of course, last year, put our faith in him, reorient our life to him, we ask for the Spirit to come inside, very imminent. Then we get baptized. We participate in his death and resurrection, and the Spirit, now we're inviting to give us advice all the time on how to live. So Christians believe that we have a very imminent relationship. God is imminent with us because of the Spirit. So he's still other. He's not our buddy. He's not a creature. Does that mean he's not a creature? Not like us like that. But he's imminent because he's revealed himself in a way. He speaks to us in our mind and our heart. Very imminent. And so the exact text you just gave is from Matthew. I don't know if you know that. It's from Matthew 18. In Matthew 18, Jesus is speaking about false prophets. And then he talks about, he says, if a brother is caught in some sin, you're to go talk to your brother one-on-one and attempt to restore the brother. If the brother doesn't listen to you, you get someone else. If he still won't listen, Then you go to the community. But the point about go get one other person and go to them is the verse I left out, what you just quoted. Because where two or more are gathered, I will be with them. And it's always ripped out of context because people don't know their Bible well, they don't care about context. It's not that every time two Christians are together, look at there, God showed up all of a sudden. I'm sure glad because, man, I was by myself for long. I didn't think he'd ever show up. Praise Jesus, you just walked in. Now God can be immanent. That's nonsense. And he says in Matthew 18, he's saying, when two or more gathered in an act of restoration and judgment, you're there to help your brother. You're saying, I'm going to be with you. I will be with you to help in this thing to help. I'll be there to give you the words and try to help you. So it is not true that we got to wait on two or more gathered before he shows up. As a Christian, the Christians very much believe, all through the New Testament, that Christians possess the Spirit. That is to say, we have access to the Holy Spirit. We have access to the Holy Spirit. The Spirit does not overwhelm us. We do not lose the freedom of the will. We have access to the Spirit. Like my office door staying open. Just imagine it was open all the time, and I lived here 24/7. You have access to come talk to me whenever you want. Doesn't mean you ever come talk to me ever. But if you get baptized, now you have access to David forever. That's not a thrill, I'm just by analogy. So you don't lose your free will because my door is always open. It's just now you have access before you didn't have access. He wasn't immanent at all when you were a pagan. When all of us before we became a Christian, he ain't immanent at all. We were sinners and we rebellion, and he's transcendent, he's other, and that's not good. Does that answer kind of what it? So,
Yes.
you,
Thank you.
okay, later on talk more. No, that's a good question.
David.
That's what?
Send it the big picture.
Big picture, that's good. That's very good. So he is close. So in your Christian life, day to day, when you pray, he's listening. He knows exactly what you're going to pray before you pray it. That's another issue. He's listening. He knows and he cares and he loves you. He's very, very, very aware. And so we should never think God the Father, Son, or Spirit is going la, 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 or I'm so far away I can't hear what's going on. No, that's not Christianity. And nor, secondly, are we waiting on another Christian to walk in the room. Shh, now two more are gathered. No. Yeah. Very good.
Is omnipresence, could that, I've always heard that God is everywhere at once.
That's a great, these are good. Omnipresence, of course, in the Latin, omnipresent means he's present everywhere present. The word omnipresent is problematic in Christian theology because when you say God is everywhere, it kind of sounds like he's a jelly spread all over the bread. Like he's everywhere present like his substance or something, and that can become problematic because that's not what Christians mean by omnipresent. So most Christian philosophers define omnipresence as God is everywhere causally present. That is, or a different way, God is consciously aware.
He's where he needs to be when he needs to be there.
He's consciously aware and present in a causal relationship, if he so chooses, at everywhere in the cosmos. Kind of like having hidden cameras all over the church building, and I can see into every room. I'm not in every room, but I have access to everyone. Or let's say for a second I blinked and I showed up in the room. It's kind of like that.
Perhaps we should think of that God is watching us instead of us being out here flying around doing.
Perhaps should we think of that God is watching us? Yes, ma'am. God, we should think that's a good sermon. We should think, in fact, very, very. If you do not, let me encourage you, as she just said very eloquently, we should very much think. God, of course, and to keep confusing the metaphors, sorry about this. Of course, literally, God doesn't see us. I say that vocabulary because it's all metaphor. God doesn't have, the Father doesn't have eyeballs. And that's why I use the word, he's aware. Does that make sense? There's this distinction. Huh?
All-knowing.
He's all, and that's why omniscience sometimes bleeds over omnipresence, but not the same. He is fully consciously aware of all true propositions, but he's also present in the moment and locale in a way that, in that sense, everywhere omnipresent.
I think I got it.
Yeah. So yes, he does see us all. There's no way. The psalmist, where can I go? The heavens? Down below, I cannot get away from that. And Paul says, what could separate from the love of God in Christ Jesus? And I can go to heaven, I can go to here. Ain't going to happen. I can't go anywhere. The psalmist says, I go down to Sheol. You're there too. Yeah, that's right. You can't escape it. It reminds me of a guy, a youth pastor told a couple, this really happened. They did a lot of stuff in the car. The couple shows up. They're a teenage couple, and they feel so guilty because they've been having sex. And the youth pastor goes, yeah, I bet, because I know there's someone who knows. And they go, who knows? How'd that happen? We thought we were doing it secretly. And he goes, I know somebody. Who? And the youth pastor said, God. And they went, oh. You see the idea that, well, oh yeah, he knows, yeah, but that's different. I thought you meant like my parents. So we've lost that sense of, we better perk up because he's watching. Of course, I know that the danger is, God's watching means like, I'm in trouble. And we don't want to have that image either. It's not the image that there's an angry parent who's going to yell at us all the time. But as Paul says in Philippians, the Lord is near. And he probably is quoting from Psalms, meaning he's with us. He wants us, I'll finish on this and we're done. We won't go to number 5. Sisters and brothers, he wants us to act like he sees us because he wants to give us advice. He wants to give us help. He wants us to lean upon him.
To do good.
He wants us to do the right thing. He wants it. Much like if I followed my son around school at Southwest, everywhere he went. He would love it. He would love it. He would. He'd hold my hand the whole time, and I would too. And I'd say, I want to do that. But everywhere he went, every time he made any decision, he goes, Dad, what do you think I ought to do? What do you think I ought to do? And I told him every single time, I think I ought to do this, I think I ought to do this. He could still say, I hear that, no, I don't want to do that. But I still want to give him advice. Well, that's what God wants to do with us via the Spirit. He wants to give us advice all the time. If we act like that, we'll be better off. Okay, let me pray for us. Thank you, Father, Son, and Spirit, for loving us, for being so good, for being different from the other gods, for revealing who you really are to us. Father, Son, and Spirit, please help reveal to us who you are more and more. And I know we see, literally and proverbially, you might say, in the face of Jesus who you really are. But even in our own, which is phenomenal. And in addition to that, in our own religious experiences, may we do as Marjorie said and see you involved at work, in conversations, in the retirement home, in the grocery store. That you're not some distant energy force like in Star Wars nonsense. You're not a tree, none of that stuff. You're a being who really wants to help us in life and guide us to be as you want. So help us. Please help us. Help us be receptive to that. Help us not sit around in shame and guilt and, oh, I should know so much more about you by now. Please help us not do any of that nonsense. And just start where we're at. Know that you're going to reveal to us all that we can handle in the moment. So please give us all that we can handle every day. Please give us the courage as well to lay down false conceptions of you. Have the courage to admit we don't know, courage to be wrong, and the courage to keep growing. You are the object of all worship, all love, devotion, loyalty, and everything. So help us give that to you. In the name of Jesus, we pray, amen. Amen. All right. Next week, I shall not be here. We will not have class. I'm going on vacation. Again. Give me. I surprised Elaine. I bought her this. Elaine's one of her favorite things. Will you click stop for that, if you don't mind? On the thing, on the top of my phone. It's not a big secret, but just in case I'm watching. One of Elaine's favorite things.